and thank you for joining us for a very special episode of Vermont Film Essentials. I'm David Metzger.
I'm Devon Ewalt.
So today we are talking about the American genre film noir, and those who may disagree that it's an actual genre, those who will not. So
Yep.
things that will come up in our discussion. So we've got a lot to fit in.
Yep.
So you said last week this is your favorite genre.
Favorite genre, there's something about the way the camera and the composition of the shots and the lighting affect mood and play into character development and all kinds of things. It's a very powerful visual medium, and the storytelling is also very powerful because of the stakes involved.
Right.
And that spoke to me, really did.
It's one of all the American genres, it's the one that is the most expressive, and certainly the one that is the most artistic. Even when the foreign cinema or European cinema started to take a look at the American genres, it's like, okay, we like that one, and we like these films, and we're going to try our hand at these types of films. So it's
look at that. Westerns, film noir and westerns are the two that were. I mean, look how much John Ford was studied outside of the U.S.
And there's something very. I think there's something very attractive about film noir as opposed to the western, because with the western, it's very much idealistic. It's an idealistic vision of the American past and of a mythology.
There's also much more of a formula applied to westerns, and people might say that film noir has a formula, but I think that's what's cool about it. I was reading that there's only 4 movies of the 26 that are in the National Film Registry, official from that classic era, and only 4 have the private detective, femme fatale, voiceover narrative, and flashbacks. It's like, it's like real, those 4 components. It's like, and that's just crazy to think about, but it's true.
Right, and it's
I was going to see if you know them later. I was going to have you try to guess them, because it's
the 4 that don't
that have private detectives, femme fatales, voiceover narrative, and flashback. Maybe we'll do it later. Yeah.
Don't put me on the spot. Just yet.
No, it wasn't.
But no, it's very loose.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that is very attractive about it, is that in the same breath that you can say without a doubt that The Big Sleep and Double Indemnity are film noirs, you can also say that The Lost Weekend, or even Ace in the Hole,
or Sunset Boulevard.
But for all intents and purposes, so film noir, what we're talking about with film noir, 1944 to about 1955, post World War II, and a lot of them just kind of dealt with, after this Great War, people coming home and having issues and dealing with them up front and not hiding from them, not glossing them over, really just trying to investigate the darker sides of human nature and the darker sides of human psychology in the framework
and
of
amazingly
a film.
Within the code. I mean, it's like I think the 2 things where you can't show someone literally getting away with murder, and you can't have 2 people in a bed that are not spouses.
Right.
So the fact that they were able to work within those constraints and literally have the leeway. I think it was the experimental nature of the visual, of that specific visual nature of these films. It really just allowed them to embrace different kinds. I mean, just looking at like Lady in the Lake, done all in POV. The only time you see Robert Montgomery's face is in a mirror. I mean, that's just amazing. And it's interesting because as groundbreaking as this genre is visually, the writing that it's based on is really the groundwork for. I mean, if you look at some of these pulp writers and when they got their start, and it's like 29, 32. You know, it's like these are writers that are creating these types of stories prior to this. That this was just a gold mine. You know,
and it's one of those types of films that can. So ever since sound came in, it seemed like for those first 10 or 20 years, the struggle was how do you make something that is also literate and literary, but also visually.
right?
And this seems to be the genre that it's just like, you know, well, it can do both in a very successful way. So the language can be poetic. It lends itself to being poetic. It lends itself to taking a novel, taking the prose of the novel, and just superimposing it onto the screen.
Right.
A lot of that is due to the voiceover narration that they use, that some of them employ, but also just the way they speak and the way they have to cut corners to talk about the dark things that they want to talk about.
Right.
They have to be smart. They have to be witty. They have to be sneaky about the way they do that.
Well, and like anything, this era is informed by so much. You know, if you look at just like the work Fritz Lang was doing prior to this, and von Sternberg, and some of the early like Curtis films, and like and just the nature of what it was kind of pulling from, as far as like Italian neorealism and
German expressionism.
Exactly, and French poetic realism, Vigo, and it's, you know, that whole circle, and it's just Renoir. It's like you can really trace it back, but it's so cool because it does its own thing with it. It's like, what if we'll take these stories, we'll take what worked here, and it's almost like an unconscious type of effort,
right,
to do all this. It's happening. It's just
and it's twofold. Like what I think is the most interesting about it is that it is so influenced by those things you just said, by those European art forms.
Right.
But then in turn, creating its own thing, it influences a whole new generation of European filmmakers.
So many German filmmakers came over, you
Yep.
know. I mean, you look at Siadmak and Lang, just being two of, I was reading that, so those two and Mann have 8 films in the National Registry on the list. So 2 of those are German. I mean, that really just kind of really speaks volumes about just German expressionism and the effect it had on changing Hollywood's landscape, visual landscape.
What was when did you first become aware of it?
That there was a film noir?
Yeah.
Probably World of Video. Just getting exposed to, I mean, I knew about Raymond Chandler, and I knew that there were these Bogart movies, and, you know, growing up with my dad. But it really was, I think, Pick Up on South Street, Ride the Pink Horse, we were talking about one time. That's mentioned nowhere on Wikipedia in the entire thing I read. I'm like, this is a great movie. But Pick Up on South Street was really what, just like, and then Out of the Past later, but Pick Up on South Street's the one that I just could not believe how good it was. And then I just went down the film noir rabbit hole, and some of my favorite ones are like one called Impact, another, you know, there are all these movies that are just really not those true B picture. It's the same with any genre. You look at horror, you look at, you know, it's like sometimes these B pictures have so much charm because they do not have a big budget. They have to cut corners. There's reasons for all the things they're doing. It's like the lighting is what it is because they didn't have the money for electricity, or they didn't have the money. You know, it's like some of these things are happening because they have to do it at night. They have to do it. You know, so it's like it's by necessity, and it's just great. One of the things that was cool from the World of Video experience is that I come across a name in my reading on Wikipedia, and it's the I don't know if he's still the curator of the Film Forum, but Foster Hirsch used to come into World of Video. We'd talk about films, and they quote him as being a film noir analyst, historian, when he talks about the requisite hopeless nature of film noir. Just kind of cool. It was like a little thing of I remember talking about film with him. And it's he carried himself in a way, I knew he was the curator of the film forum, but I didn't really know that he was such a film voice that he's getting quoted on,
right,
about talking about film noir, Yeah. But how about you?
So in first year of college, they had a class called American Genres, and there's 3 different ones, and the first one that we had to take was Westerns, musicals, melodrama, and film noir. So do the Westerns and fall in love with John Ford.
Right.
Musicals, I finally watch a Fred and Ginger movie. Melodrama, Douglas Sirk. And I got my mind blown there. And then we do film noir, and it's I obviously knew of the genre and of the phrase, but just sitting down and saying okay, we're gonna watch these 5 films.
Right.
And they were The Third Man, Pick Up on South Street, Out of the Past, Kiss Me Deadly, and Big Sleep. So watching those 5 films, and I'm just it's just really...
those are 5 of the greatest films ever made, so
right.
That really speaks volumes about film noir as a potent genre.
Right. And it kind of just opened my eyes and just said, I just loved the camera work of it, above everything else. As a
Right.
young, budding film student, it was just oh my God, look at this angle, and look at the way they use the lighting here, and I'm looking at it on that type of
Right.
level. And then later on, as I start watching more films, I start looking at neo-noir films that we'll get into, and it's seeing how the filmmakers that I am enjoying now or from the 70s, how they were borrowing from those films or
Right.
influenced by those films. And it just seemed like it's such a potent genre, just my favorite genre is the road film, and it's similar in the sense that it's very loose in that any type of movie can be considered a road film.
Right.
You just need a couple of elements, namely a vehicle and the road.
Right.
And with film noir, it just seems like such a potent framework for a director to come in or a filmmaker to come in and just say, I'm going to put all of my style into this, and I can do so much with the camera, and I can do so much with character development and showing, it just...
lighting someone from below,
Yeah.
or shooting through, with using mirrors, shooting through glass, all kinds of these different devices.
And unlike other films of this era where it's it's an escapist entertainment, and you're there's a wish fulfillment with a musical, with a screwball comedy, where it's not quite reality. And film noir is not quite reality either, but somehow it gets to that darkness just a little bit more and just seems so much these people aren't effing around. I remember watching Brute Force with my father, and at the end when he picks the warden up and throws him out of the thing, and my dad's like, "Holy, Dave!"
I have a line about Brute Force in my new album with SK. I say, I got bars like Burt Lancaster and Brute Force. And the other one is, I'm going off like Cagney and White Heat. I can't, this is the one where I just kind of let my, but it's Brute Force, I never thought about that being the basically source material for Fincher's Alien film.
Right.
I didn't even think about that.
Right.
And now I can't wait I started watching Alien 3 again through that lens. It's so cool.
So, for me, I always go back to Double Indemnity and The Third Man. The Third Man, to me...
the fact that The Third Man is British noir.
Right.
The fact that it's one of the best ever, really, it's Pretty cool.
And that I was just about to say, like, it's like, you know, I feel wrong saying that because it's not quite an American film noir.
But just the presence of Wells, I mean, it really is. He is like Brando in that, landing like that caliber and iconic of a figure to play that role.
And for the majority of the film, never in sight, always mentioned.
It's like Brando in Apocalypse Now.
It is.
They use in the exact same way. I wonder if it was conscious.
It's got to be. But no, I mean that. I mean, I wrote a paper on this, but his reveal in that film, the way it builds, the way the little pieces of information come together, and that you know exactly who it is standing in those shadows, and then when that light goes on in the loft up above, and it just creates that shaft of light that comes right onto his face, and then you do this push in on him, and he smiles. There is such just an infectious feeling of just, oh, this is just somebody at the height of their powers creating something unlike anything else. And yes, it's borrowing all these different elements, and it's, you know, tilting the camera.
See, I think there's two different types of noir. I think there's like gritty B noir, and then there's like stylized noir, you know? And I love both. I just think there's a more workman-like noir that's very appealing and accessible. And then there's like, well, what if we did this? And what if we could accomplish this?
Well, and one of the...
Like Lang and Wells. And, you know.
Right. Well, with that, like with those types of, those gritty noirs, like you were saying, like it's a very... There's a lot of B movies out there with titles like Tension and Fury and all.
I love it.
And it's great because when you see them, you see, and especially as someone who wants to be like independent filmmakers and everything, and who don't have money and don't have resources.
Right. It's appealing. It's very right. It's like, wait, what?
Because most of these films, it's like, you know, one location, a group of 5 or 6 actors. And this situation that's this kind of like chamber drama that is erupting. But within that small space, they're able to do so much because it's all about this internal struggle within the characters and how they're going to survive, how they're going to get out of this situation. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with it.
That is what appeals to me the most, is the desperation of the characters, because that is what is fueling a lot of this behavior and what is most appealing, I think, about it to a viewer, at least for me, because it's like you can't maybe relate to some of the like nefarious kind of underworld activity maybe, but you can definitely relate to the way, you know, being pushed into a corner and feeling like you have to choose, and it's like, it's really very human. It deals with humanity in a very real way, in a much realer way than a lot of regular films. Because it's like a lot of times things are sensationalized or made into, you know, forced into certain narratives, when I feel like it's like they kind of did what they wanted, and they really got almost left alone to kind of do, you know. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
And nothing seemed to... it's like, oh, we can't do that because, you know, the audience wouldn't like it, or it's not commercial. And they seem to be like, well, the hell with it, we're going to do it.
And certain films proved the commercial viability. You know, I think Double Indemnity certainly helped. It was a commercial success. It was nominated for 7 Oscars. Kind of proved that like these can be important films.
And what's interesting about that is that is one of the first films to come out to be labeled a film noir, or at least be held up and saying, like, you know, it started with this film.
I think Strangers on the Third Floor was one of the ones that was considered the first official noir. I think there's a couple in contention. But then like that's the first one that actually like stood on its own two legs as a powerhouse of a film. Yeah.
And to hear interviews with Wilder, it's like, well, I was just making this movie about these two characters, right? And I had this script from this great novelist, and it just, that's what I was doing. It's not like I was like, oh, how do I make a film noir? But within that film, like, there's so many great moments and great things. And I think one of the greatest things is that most of the time we think of, like with the four films, it's like, it's got to be someone in organized crime. It's got to be a private detective. It's got to be a cop of some kind.
Right.
But with that, it's like, he's an insurance salesman. It's like, how low on the totem pole do you got to be interesting to be an insurance salesman?
And that's the appeal of some of these stories is like, look how easily you could fall.
Right.
What if think about it. It's like the thing that love makes us do, the things that wanting money or wanting power or various corruptions of the human soul. It's like it's all on display.
Or just seeing a beautiful woman on the top of the stairs and being like, oh, I want to be with her, right?
Exactly.
And what do I have to do? Like, how much do I have to sacrifice my integrity?
I think that's one of the, as much as I love the ones with like gangsters and hard-boiled characters like Big Heat and stuff, I also love ones like Scarlet Street and Pick Up on South Street, because like with Scarlet Street, you've got this kind of like likable character that's just being like led around by the nose, right? And then you've got like Pick Up on South Street, where maybe Richard Widmark, he's a three-time loser, as they call him, and he's a thief, but a small-time thief. But it's like he's a good guy, man. He's a cool guy, though. He keeps the beer at the bottom of the river. He pulls it up. I mean, you can really get a sense that he is a good person that doesn't necessarily respect the law all the time. But there's various degrees of. You're not really. What I love about noir is that it doesn't paint in shades of good or evil.
Right.
It doesn't say this person's good, this person's evil. No, we're all human. We're all morally corruptible. So don't judge too harshly. It's beautiful, man.
Shades of gray.
Yes.
And that's why it's like, what's also appealing is someone who has come to love black and white photography and worship it as like, it's like, here's a genre where it's like, it's got to be in black and white, right? If it's in color, it's not a film noir.
In fact, one of the things that prevents people from saying Vertigo is a noir is because of its use of color, which I think it uses noir. It has noir tendencies.
Yes,
it's a psychological film with noir tendencies.
Right. Yeah. Now, once we get into neo-noir,
then it's free. I love the term film soleil. So it was I forget who coined it, but it was like it's that like hot like boats on the water or like hot settings, desert noir, like various like you could say the whole like Everglades noir, like how like tropical settings or anything like that. There's something appealing about it.
Right.
It's like, oh, this is like corruption, but when it's too hot. You know what I mean? It's just like it takes on a new vibe.
Well, and one of the films that I know has both Western and film noir tendencies, but can't be a film noir because it is in color, is Bad Day at Black Rock. It's got most of the elements of a Western, right? But there's all these like it deals with that dark.
The screenplay is that of a noir.
Yeah. And it has that setting.
Right.
Ace in the Hole too. This small desert town.
Yeah.
And again, like it is able to deal with characters that we would not normally see in a Hollywood film. A news reporter, a boxer, more a boxer in Hollywood films, but they don't have to be. They can be a crime film, but not necessarily have to be in it the way that we think that they need to be in it.
There's this great quote I read that A film noir is defined not by a fundamental attribute, but by a general disposition and group of elements, some, but rarely and perhaps never all, of which are to be found in each of the genre's films. It's like, I like that sort of loose interpretation of it. It's like, you know when you're watching a film noir, but you can't exactly say these are the things that make a film noir. So there's another quote about it being an ever-elusive phenomenon, which I love, that you never quite have it in your hands.
Right.
You know?
Right.
What does it mean? What is it?
The other, one of the books that I had in college, I like pinpointed this phrase, but it's like aimless protagonist. And something about that just seems so attractive to me, is that, because there were always these books or essays or professors or whatever that were saying, like, you got to give your character purpose. They have to have a goal, right? And yes, 9 times out of 10 that is the case, but something about film noir is that these are characters that are just put upon, and that they just kind of stumble in and they don't have a goal until they see something that they want, or some life that they want, and then it's just they're backed into that corner and they've got to make decisions to survive.
I just remembered 2 of my favorite film noirs ever, and I believe they're both by Fritz Lang, that I didn't write down here because I just didn't even think about them. Clash by Night, and is it Human Desire? Is it Glenn Ford?
Yeah.
And is it Gloria Graham?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are killer films, man. Like, really great.
And Fritz Lang, like, I mean, you can make the case that M was what?
Well, it was one of the first crime films of the sound era that had all the noir elements of the protagonist being a criminal. The visual landscape was very much, I mean, what eventually would become the staples of film noir.
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
And that it's dealing with these, with American film noir, it's coming out of a post-World War II society where, we're dealing with characters who are forgotten or not, not able to deal with these psychological desires that they have, and not given emotional weight, or at least just being shunned by society. And with M, it's about Nazi Germany coming up.
Right.
Right? And these films are able to roll around in the muck of the time that they're being made in, and really just kind of answer.
I think M opened the door too for films like, I don't think it did. Scarface, Little Caesar, The Public Enemy, all those crime films that then subsequently came out in the early 30s. It paved the way, and then Scarface kind of proved that you can have an American crime film with a protagonist that is morally, reprehensible. I mean, and that really opened the door for a lot of different films to be made.
So I wanna jump to neo noir.
Sure.
So
let's
we can
have
get
a
that
sci-fi noir talk too at some point.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's do that. But first, I just wanna. I would like to. What do you consider your favorite
film
noir?
Well, it's a 2-part answer, because Touch of Evil is my favorite film.
Right.
And Touch of Evil is considered the last noir of the noir era by a lot of people. But I feel like it's like a 2-way tie between Out of the Past and Pick Up on South Street for me. It's hard for me to decide what I like better. Sometimes I like this one, sometimes I like this one. But I think Out of the Past might have, I think that's the perfect noir.
Right. It's the one where it's like, okay.
Everything's in there, right? It's the one you want to show. Like if an alien visited and said, what is film noir?
Right.
And you're like, Out of the Past, watch that. You'll sort of get the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah. But that's why it's such a potent genre, because it's so tough to choose. There are what is yours?
For me, it's definitely, it's The Third Man, but I almost want to say Odd Man Out. It's like I can't decide between those 2 Carol Reed noirs, because they're. With Odd Man Out, it's like this amazing James Mason performance, and the way that it takes a story that you feel like is paper thin, but just through endless amounts of expressionism and torment and introspection, like it's able to just bring it out to like this full film. So I almost say like, oh, maybe it's better than The Third Man.
Right.
But then I watch The Third Man and I'm like, no, it can't be. It's something about the Vienna location, all the ruins, and that it really does do a great job of being a post-war film and talking about the way a location is impacted by a war, how the people are driven to, Harry Lime is driven to these nefarious acts in order to profit from war.
Right.
And that Joseph Cotton's character is he's unlike any other main character in film, in that he's so white bread. Like there's so many things that he wants to do. He wants to be the hero. I love that they make him a writer, that he writes westerns.
Right.
Right. He's
I mean,
able
that's
to
such
write
an
these
appealing
heroes.
noir character. If you look at Sunset Boulevard and a lot of these,
So yeah, I just can't see the forest for the trees for The Third Man. All right, so
I wanted to, before we jump into neo-noir, I just want to mention In a Lonely Place.
Yep.
Because it contains one of the best, it really defines the anti-hero for me. That is the quintessential anti-hero. And I wanted to mention Ida Lupino as being basically the only female filmmaker of a certain era and really being a pioneer. And just being very impressive what she was able to do in a business that was dominated by men.
So In a Lonely Place, Nicholas Ray. Also, They Live by Night by him. And then I'll throw my hat in the ring for Jacques Tourneur, who did Cat People, and also
And Out of the Past.
Out of the Past, yeah. All right.
Yes.
Neo-noir.
Neo-noir. I'll just say like when I first became aware there was a thing called neo-noir, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, it was sort of, I think it was like, there were these movies that were coming out in like the early 90s that was like Tequila Sunrise and like Havana, Twilight. There were all these movies, and I just sort of started to see like a similarity between them. It was like, Indecent Proposal, they all kind of were the same kind of like murky, kind of moral murkiness, right?
Yep.
And then it's just like, you just sort of figure out that it's like, oh, this is its own thing. And then it just became very appealing to me because it's the same. And some people there's various degrees of doing it too. You can either go for the straight up like, I don't know, you're either paying homage or you're creating a new sensibility.
Right.
Like Michael Mann or, various just ways to do it. What was your introduction to it?
So I guess the bridge is Cahiers de Cinema, they're looking to these American filmmakers and these American films, and one of the genres that they latch onto is film noir. So Godard does Breathless.
Right.
Truffaut does Shoot the Piano Player. But then you also have, Kurosawa's doing The Lower Depths and Stray, Dog.
Yeah, Drunken Angel, High and Low, yeah.
And then
Visconti did Ossessione.
Yep. And then in the 70s, I feel like there's a couple things that happen. One, Polanski does Chinatown, and that's like probably like, how does a filmmaker take a film like The Big Sleep and update it for the 70s? So there's that. But then there's also Taxi Driver.
Long Goodbye.
Long Goodbye.
Because Long Goodbye represents an interesting concept because it's what he would later do with McCabe and Mrs. Miller. He's so familiar with the genre that he's kind of doing a riff on, that he's able to kind of provide various critiques of it interwoven into the fabric of his film. So
in very subtle ways too, because you know a lot of people say like, well, he turns those genres on
on their heads,
but it's
right.
like, but he doesn't really, because
he maintains the world.
yeah,
though.
you know,
Yeah.
it follows the structure.
I mean, the various characters in Long Goodbye, from like Arnold and the Stu, you know, to like I forget the short character actor, the dude, I forget his name.
What else is he in?
He can just play like such a sinister, like basically all the different kind of like archetypes are in there.
Right.
You know, you just have he changed the way Marlowe feels for the time.
Yeah.
And created this sort of countercultural figure that's really interesting to watch.
Wim Wenders does The American Friend.
Right.
And I feel like when I think of neo-noir, it's like they trade neon city lights for black and white. Like that's the trade-off. If you're going to do it in color, how do we do what they did in black and white but do it in color? And it's like, you know, those shots in Taxi Driver when he's driving at night, and those reds and the greens and the lights of the city, how they blur out of focus and kind of morph into this new language.
Well, I mean, the urban landscape was always being used in film noir as a sort of like, you know, maze or, you know, labyrinth, and it's like I feel like it's no different when you're dealing with, you know, you're just changing the way it's being experienced. You're bringing it into the modern age, which is what I feel like had to happen.
Right.
You know.
And I feel like Michael Mann with Thief, not so much with Heat. I think Heat really lends itself more to crime films than to film noir. But with Thief, and then even a little bit of Collateral. But that kind of lends the way to Drive, Pulp Fiction.
Yep.
You know,
Christopher Nolan.
And there's so much that they're able to, like, I love, like, I will always have a sore spot for the film that I know is influenced by those types of films. Like, that's why I love films like Drive. That's why I can't get enough of Shutter Island. Even though people say that it's lesser Scorsese, it's like, no, it's pretty up there, because how he's able to take all the language of all the filmmakers that he loves and turn it into something else is pretty astounding. And there's elements of Shutter Island that, you know, you can trace back to noir films like Laura.
I mean, you know, God, how did I know? I mean, there was one point in time where I thought Laura was the best noir ever.
It's pretty good.
I had forgotten about Laura. That might still be it for me, because I still remember the way I felt after the first time I saw it. It really is such a remarkable film.
Otto Preminger.
I mean, Preminger made a handful of noir classics, man. There's just too many.
There's too many.
Force of Evil. It's, you know, it's just like once you start, you just can't.
And then, like, do you? What time? What?
Gun Crazy.
Gun Crazy. When was Jesus? Naked Kiss.
48.
Okay, so then that's film noir.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Easily. I mean, Dassin definitely. I mean, and we went over to France and did Rafifi.
Yep.
And that's one of the best international noir films ever. I mean, I look at Jean Gabin as being like the heir apparent to, like, it's like he Belmondo and Bogart and McQueen were like the coolest tough guys of that era, you know.
What do you think when a filmmaker of today tries to do a film noir exactly like back then?
Well, it's interesting because I was reading about LA Confidential being considered like deliberately retro noir, but I didn't really feel like tone-wise it was at all.
Right.
Like maybe it was like he set it during that time, but it felt like a modern film.
Did you see The Good German?
Yeah, it was a good movie. I like Man Who Wasn't There.
Mm-hmm.
I think I love the way the Coen brothers pay homage to noir.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe I didn't read Barton Fink on the list of movies that are considered noir by them, because I think it has, I mean, yeah, maybe it's like an homage to old Hollywood and just quirky, but I definitely get some noir sensibility to it, and just the way the story's handled and told, you know?
Blood Simple is...
Oh, that's just the classic. And then Big Lebowski, I mean, unorthodox. I think that's what's cool about certain ways it's, you know, given homage. It's just sometimes it's not so deliberate or not so apparent.
I'm waiting for, like, I feel like we're in this era right now where there's so much to say about what's happening in the world right now. That a genre like this could be reopened and reworked.
Definitely.
And
I mean, I've heard such great things about, God, what is Boots Riley's film that did so well? Rapper from the Coup, I forget.
Oh,
It was like the cult film of the year. Like it like really was like, I can't remember the name right now, but
it's bothering me very much.
Yeah, but it sounded very different and unorthodox, and commentary and social commentary and all that. And I feel like that can kind of open the door for that kind of film to really even subtly comment on things. But yeah, we'll have to see what comes out.
Blade Runner.
Yeah. I mean, you know, my 4 favorite films are Touch of Evil, Blade Runner, Pick Up on South Street, and Psycho. And 3 of those have noir elements to them, you know? So it's like, I mean, Blade Runner, just Ridley Scott had such command of noir language, and it was that whole, it's like the cyberpunk era, like William Gibson novels and Philip K. Dick, and this sort of bleak desolation of humanity, you know, the way the human condition was being diagrammed in these books. It's really opened the door for all kinds of interpretations. And he created a whole feel.
And married them so effortlessly. Like there's not like it's almost like he just saw it that way, right? And there's so many different shots that I'm thinking of, like right now, that it, like even the opening scene of Blade Runner when they're doing the interrogation and all the smoke and everything, and the way the shafts of light are hitting. I mean, it's really compelling, and you know, science fiction films just didn't look like that until then. And then you got
Dark City, 12 Monkeys,
Terminator came right after that.
Right.
And there's even the club that they go to in Terminator is called Tech Noir, and he called it that because he's like, well, I think I think this is a new thing that's going to be starting.
And you know, The Matrix borrowed so heavily from William Gibson, Neuromancer. I mean, and that whole, but put their own spin on it. I feel like they made sort of more of an adventure movie than any type of sci-fi or noir. Like it really had the spirit of like an adventure film, but it did have some noir elements to it. Sort of played with it rather than owned it, you know.
Unforgiven as being as much of a Western as it is, and it is, has a lot of noir elements in it.
Never thought about that.
It's almost like you know, it's like a Western as told through the lens of like a third man.
You know, Alien Nation was always one of my favorite, like buddy cop, sort of gritty sci-fi movies. Had some noir aspects to it. I would argue that Night of the Hunter is gothic noir. I know that there's definitely people who say it's not noir, and
it's, you know, like we discussed on the episode of Night of the Hunter, it's like it's so many different things, and the way he's able to pull them all together is it's fascinating. but I mean, there's shots in that film, and there's moments of that film where it's like it's noir.
I loved reading that The Invisible Man is considered horror noir because if you just think about the way that story, it's like solving the mystery of your own existence.
Right.
I mean,
Oh
the way
my God.
it's handled.
Well, and James Whale is really, I mean, he is one of those filmmakers where he saw things his own way.
And it's also shot by Arthur Edison, who shot Maltese Falcon. So there's a shared visual sensibility there. I mean,
yeah. I like that. Now I want to go home and watch The Invisible Man. Postman Always Rings Twice, in both of its incarnations.
Yep.
It's been made thrice.
Ossession was also from the same novel. Ossessione, if that's correct. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything that The Killing.
Yep. Gritty. Such a gritty film. I feel like that had an influence on Tarantino.
Yes.
I mean,
Absolutely.
obviously Kiss Me Deadly, but I mean, The Killer's definitely, Reservoir Dogs, certain characters really seem to, and actually Taken at Pelham 1, 2, 3 has some grittiness to it there as well.
Well, and I can't remember. So with The Killing, it's the narrative structure that he took, because it flashes back and forth and goes every which way. And with Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3,
He takes the character names from being colors. Yeah.
So Ride the Pink Horse, because it was such an amazing moment when we both realized that.
I mean, that's a movie you just straight up don't hear about.
Yeah.
And I would never have seen it if I wasn't making my way through the Leonard Maltin Guide, watching every movie that I could find. It just happened to be the next one. It's like, oh.
Well, and God bless Criterion Collection, so they released it, and that's how
Did they really?
Yeah, and I got introduced to it. So yeah.
So it's on.
So come in November, 50% off.
I'll watch that again.
But I don't know if it's on the Criterion channel. Check.
Okay. Gotcha.
But yeah, they released it, and then when it came up, I'm like, what's that? And I read the synopsis, and I'm like, gotta watch that. And yeah, it's like it's one of those perfect B movie noirs that just come out of nowhere.
Yep.
And
Such
it's
a
so
well-made
well
film.
written.
Yeah.
So
it's
well
got such
structured.
memorable dialogue.
Yeah. And the pacing of it, like it just, it goes by like this, and there's just no fat, no spared moment.
One of my favorite just aspects of any noir film ever is Thelma Ritter's performance in Pick Up on South Street. There's something, I think she won the Oscar for it. There's something so, I don't know, man, does not feel like a performance. When she sort of just knows she's at the end, it's like, I mean, it's the same way when I watched The Champ, the old 1920s movie. It's like there's something so real about her, and it's just an incredibly human moment in a film that is like making its way through this narrative, and then it could have been played so differently, and she just like stripped it of everything, of any affect, and it just was like there,
She's great anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Is that it?
We did it.
Wow.
Did we get everything in?
I mean, probably not.
Yeah. Femme fatale.
Yes. Who's the best femme fatale? Gloria Graham, Barbara Stanwyck.
Barbara Stanwyck, hands down.
See, I'm a Gloria Graham guy, man.
Oh.
I respect it. I respect it. Just something about Gloria Graham in The Big Heat, and just various other films. Yeah, but so many great ones.
It is one of the great contributions of the genre, is giving you not just a female character, but a fully fledged, no matter how black they paint that female character, nonetheless, it is a full three-dimensional human being. And some of the performances that we get from these actresses in these roles is pretty astounding.
Definitely.
All right, that was my last thing.
All right.
All right, this has been great. Can't wait for the next one.
Yeah. What do we got next week?
So next week we got Tim Bridge is going to be here. We're going to talk about Psycho. Which is his favorite Alfred Hitchcock film. So that's going to be exciting. And then that's going to start the whole month of October where we're going to be talking about horror films. So we'll do Psycho, The Shining, The Innocents, and then a compare and contrast of The Thing. So we'll talk about the 1951 version and the 1982 version. Cool. So see you next time. My name's David Metzger.
I'm Devon Ewalt.
Take care.